Hi everyone. Today we're going to look into the case of a mother who disappeared from her home under strange circumstances. The police started investigating and found some surprising and strange clues. They eventually figured out the truth, which shocked even experienced detectives. This case quickly became one of the most talked about in the country, as its details left everyone outraged. Taryn Grant was born on June 22, 1972 in Michigan. She spent her childhood on a farm with her parents and sister, where she enjoyed outdoor activities like riding horses and helping with the animals. In school, Taryn was highly involved in sports, participating in cheerleading, basketball, and playing in the school band. After high school, Taryn enrolled at the University of Michigan, where she met Stephen. They began dating and soon married after her graduation. Taryn pursued a business degree and landed a job at a large international company. Meanwhile, Stephen, initially aspiring to enter politics after working as a state senator's assistant in college, found himself working at his father's small tool-making shop after the senator retired. 4 years after getting married, Taryn and Stephen welcomed their first daughter, followed by a son a few years later. With the arrival of their second child, they purchased a new home in a desirable neighborhood in Maumee County, Michigan, near Detroit. Taryn had advanced in her career significantly by then, but frequent work-related travel kept her away from home, limiting her time with the family to weekends. Because Tara traveled a lot for work, Stephen had to take care of the children most of the time. His job at his father's company had flexible hours, allowing him to be there for the kids. However, managing both work and childcare was tough, so they decided to hire a full-time nanny. They used a program that helps families find live-in nannies from other countries. With Tara's good salary, they could afford this. And soon they found the perfect nanny. They hired a young woman from Germany who quickly bonded with their children and took on most of the childcare responsibilities. With more free time, Stephen also took up a part-time role as a youth soccer coach. Despite their stable financial situation, Tara's frequent absence strained her relationship with Stephen. She was only home on weekends, leading to more frequent arguments between them. Tara looked forward to a future promotion that might allow her to adjust her schedule and spend more time at home. Until then, her busy schedule kept her away on business trips almost daily. On February 14, 2007, Stephen made a startling call to the police. He reported that Tara had been missing for 5 days, which was highly unusual. Stephen explained that on the evening of February 9th, Tara returned from a business trip and abruptly announced she had to leave a day earlier than planned, sparking an argument between them. As Tara packed her suitcase, Stephen overheard her on the phone saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street." Shortly after, Tara left in a dark-colored car, and since then, she had not been in contact and did not respond to any of his calls. The police's first question was why Stephen waited 5 days before reporting her disappearance. Stephen explained that initially, he didn't think there was a reason to worry. He believed Tara had left early for her business trip and wasn't responding to his calls due to their argument. However, as days passed without any contact from Tara, he grew increasingly concerned. Normally, when she traveled, she would call their young children, aged 3 and 7, but this time, there had been no communication from her. On Monday, Tara's boss called Stephen to inform him that she had missed a meeting, which was highly unusual and indicated she hadn't gone to work. Concerned, Stephen reached out to Tara's relatives and explained the situation. However, they speculated that Tara might have needed some time away from the frequent arguments with Stephen. She had previously confided in her parents about their increasingly troubled relationship due to her demanding job, leading to frequent disputes. Therefore, her relatives assumed she had chosen to take a break from Stephen and anticipated her return home soon. As days passed without any sign of Tara and no response to calls, Stephen grew increasingly concerned about her well-being. Eventually, he became worried that something serious might have happened to her and took the step of contacting the police. During the police questioning, detectives observed several suspicious scratches on Stephen. They inquired whether the argument with his wife had escalated to physical confrontation, but Stephen denied any such occurrence. Stephen explained that the scratches were from his work with metal parts at his father's shop, where such incidents were common. Following the interview at the police station, detectives requested to search their home, to which Stephen consented. Upon their arrival, they discovered that all of Tara's belongings, including her documents, purse and suitcase, were missing. Stephen also allowed them access to Tara's computer, where they examined her bank account. Detectives noted a lack of transactions since her disappearance, which struck them as unusual. Typically, if she had traveled somewhere, there would have been activity such as purchasing plane tickets or booking accommodations, but there was no such activity in her account for the past 5 days. During the house search, detectives found no clues to explain Tara's disappearance. There were no signs suggesting she had been a victim of a crime, leaving investigators to focus on tracing her movements since February 9th. The local police department had limited experience with such cases, as the area was known for its safety, typically handling minor neighbor disputes and other non-violent incidents. They requested Stephen to take a polygraph test, which angered him as he vehemently denied any involvement and broke down in tears. The police left his residence to plan their next move. The next morning, Stephen unexpectedly called them, expressing readiness for interrogation. Shortly after, his lawyer contacted the detectives, advising against it. The police focused on Stephen, Tara's husband, as the primary person of interest, following standard procedure in such cases and due to the lack of other leads. Tara's relatives, friends and colleagues confirmed they hadn't heard from her since February 9th and had no information about her whereabouts. Additionally, there was no activity on her bank account, despite the likely need for purchases. Detectives strategized on how to approach Stephen for interrogation and discovered an intriguing detail. His driver's license had been revoked, yet he continued to drive. They waited until he got behind the wheel and arrested him. However, Stephen perceived this as further suspicion and declined to cooperate with the police. His lawyer promptly secured his release, and Stephen returned home without providing any statements. The police continued their search for clues and obtained Tara's mobile phone records. They discovered that her last call was made on the day she disappeared. She phoned Stephen from the airport, informing him she would be returning home soon. Following this call, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach her, leaving several voicemails. In these messages, he urged her to respond, expressed concern for their children, and pleaded for her to come back home. The phone itself was later found turned off, and based on data from the cell phone carrier, it was last connected to cell towers near Tara's house on the evening she went missing. Interestingly, the police noted that there were no incoming calls during that critical period. Previously, Stephen had mentioned that someone called Tara just before she left home, indicating that they would meet her on the street. Despite this, from the voicemails detectives listened to, Stephen's concern for his wife was evident. He expressed genuine worry about Tara's well-being and frustration over her absence, especially concerning their children. Although detectives did not dismiss Stephen as a suspect, they also failed to uncover any new leads. Stephen persisted in refusing to cooperate with the police, accusing them of focusing on him instead of actively searching for Tara. Instead, he turned to the media, which began reporting on the case soon after Tara's disappearance. The public's interest grew rapidly, and Stephen frequently appeared on camera, appealing for Tara's safe return. When the company that provided Stephen and Tara with the nanny learned about the case, they decided to send her back to Germany. Before her departure, she cooperated with the police, providing a statement about her time in their home. She recalled being at a bar with friends on the evening Tara returned, and upon coming back she found Stephen visibly upset, who informed her that Tara had just left the house. Despite Stephen's reluctance to assist the police, he hired a private detective, a former FBI agent, to conduct his own investigation, which also failed to locate Tara. Facing a lack of leads, the police adopted a new strategy. They contacted the company through which Tara and Stephen hired the nanny, uncovering an intriguing detail. Before settling on the German nanny, they had employed a total of 6 nannies, none of whom stayed long in the position. Detectives interviewed them, and nearly all expressed discomfort with Stephen's behavior, describing it as not only odd but also intimidating. They reported incidents of him searching through their personal belongings, asking intrusive questions and frequently raising his voice at them, as if expecting unquestioned compliance. The police were puzzled by why the German nanny painted a positive picture of her time with the family, despite previous nannies' concerns about Stephen's behavior. They obtained permission to monitor her communications and discovered messages between her and Stephen exposing their affair. It became clear that the 19-year-old had been romantically involved with him while Tara was away on business trips, continuing until she left the country. While the discovery of the affair provided a lead, it didn't confirm Stephen's role in Tara's disappearance. Detectives pursued other leads by interviewing Tara's relatives and friends, who expressed long-standing dislike towards Stephen since his marriage to her. They described his controlling behavior and strained relationships with Tara's family, suggesting a troubled dynamic that raised suspicions. Investigators soon uncovered another significant detail. Stephen's former girlfriend, whom he had dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police with surprising information. She revealed that Stephen had initiated contact with her several months earlier, and their conversations had grown increasingly intimate over time. Eventually, Stephen confessed his desire to pursue a romantic relationship with her, despite both being married. He also expressed frustrations about Tara, citing her frequent absences. Stephen suspected Tara of infidelity with her boss and admitted to installing monitoring software on her computer to check her messages, though he found no evidence to support his suspicions. All of this heightened the police's suspicion regarding the husband's role in Tara's disappearance, yet they lacked concrete evidence. As weeks passed without any sign of Tara, they started contemplating the grim possibility that she might not be alive. Extensive searches were conducted, involving volunteers scouring the vicinity around Tara's home and a nearby large park within a several-mile radius. Despite several days of searching, they found no trace of her. On February 28th, a local resident alerted the police. Aware of Tara's disappearance and the ongoing search, she was walking in the park when she noticed something unusual under a tree along the trail. Covered with branches and snow, a plastic bag caught her attention. Curious, she inspected it closely. Inside the bag, she observed rubber gloves and what appeared to be metal shavings. At the bottom, there was a dark red substance. She decided to take the bag and delivered it to the police. Detectives promptly suspected that the red substance could be blood and sent the bag to the lab for analysis. However, there was a problem. Experts cautioned that DNA analysis might be delayed by up to 2 months due to their heavy workload. Despite this, they scrutinized the contents and verified that the substance appeared to be human blood. The police swiftly concentrated their search in the vicinity where the bag was discovered, mobilizing all their resources. Stephen opted out of joining the search, claiming prejudice from the police. Instead, he granted an extensive interview to a news channel, during which he made several contentious remarks. He consistently blamed Tara for her frequent absence from home, accusing her of being an inadequate mother. Stephen asserted that he assumed nearly all parental duties and asserted he was a better mother than Tara. When questioned about their financial status and whether he relied heavily on Tara's income, Stephen grew enraged and vehemently denied needing a penny from her. Throughout the interview, Stephen also alleged Tara's infidelity without presenting any proof. He consistently criticized Tara and underscored the challenges he faced in their marriage. As Stephen gave the interview, detectives made headway. Previously stymied in their efforts to secure a search warrant for Tara's home due to insufficient grounds, Stephen had declined voluntary searches. However, following the discovery of the blood-stained bag in the park, the judge approved the warrant. The police arrived at the house just as Stephen returned from the interview. Detectives informed him of the search warrant, and Stephen allowed them entry before calling his lawyer. The lawyer asked if Stephen was under arrest, to which the police replied no. Stephen then mentioned he would take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from inside the house, and departed while the police commenced their search. They went through the house room by room, eventually reaching the garage. There, one of the detectives noticed a large green container with several plastic bags inside. Slitting one open, they found an unknown substance, along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the officer realized with horror that it likely contained human remains. In total, there were 5 bags in the container, and the detectives quickly confirmed that they indeed contained the remains of a woman. The police realized that they had found Tara's body and Stephen must be her murderer. However, Stephen had not returned, prompting an immediate police search for him. There was concern that he might flee or pose a threat to others, given the likelihood of imminent imprisonment. Meanwhile, additional officers were summoned to intensify the search in the park. Since only a portion of Tara's remains were recovered from the garage, over 100 officers from nearby districts joined the effort. Their concerted efforts yielded results swiftly. Several hundred yards from where the initial bag was found, they located another part of the body and later discovered the head. Due to the cold temperatures, Tara's remains were well preserved, facilitating detectives in confirming her identity. They discovered several additional body parts, suspending the search as night fell. To resume in the morning, simultaneously, detectives pursued Stephen's whereabouts without success. Contacting his friends, they learned that Stephen had called one of them, disclosing the police search at his home and requesting pickup from the street. Stephen's friend drove him to his home, observing Stephen's unusual behavior during the ride. Stephen appeared frightened, with trembling hands, giving the impression that he was on the brink of an emotional breakdown. Upon reaching the friend's house, Stephen expressed a strong desire to see his children and requested to borrow the friend's car. At that moment, Stephen's children were in another state, being cared for by his sister. The friend gave him his pickup truck and Stephen left. Police requested information on Stephen's phone and credit card activity, enabling them to track his route. They discovered Stephen had made multiple cash withdrawals as he traveled towards a neighboring state, prompting them to contact his sister. Realizing Stephen was heading to his children, the police swiftly set off in pursuit. Then something unexpected happened. The police received a call from Germany, from the very nanny with whom Stephen had had a romantic relationship. She told them that Stephen had just called her and confessed to killing Tara. According to him, they indeed had an argument that evening, and Stephen started yelling at her. Tara then slapped him in the face and he flew into a rage. He pushed her, and Tara hit her head after falling on the floor, resulting in her death. The police were now convinced of Stephen's involvement, but their immediate priority was locating him. They spent several hours searching the area along the highway to the neighboring state. Eventually, they found Stephen's friend's car abandoned near the entrance to the national park, but Stephen himself was nowhere to be found. The police entered the park and after several hours of searching with thermal cameras, eventually located Stephen. He was found lying under a tree, dressed lightly, and showing signs of hypothermia. Stephen appeared disoriented, speaking to trees and mumbling unintelligibly. The officers promptly airlifted him to the hospital due to his critical condition. Despite his body temperature dropping to just 88 degrees Fahrenheit, doctors successfully saved Stephen's life, though it took some time for him to fully recover. While in the hospital, Stephen was charged with murder, and detectives transferred the case to the court. Interestingly, on the same day, his lawyer refused to defend Stephen, vaguely stating, "I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror in the mornings." As a result, Stephen was assigned a new lawyer. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of Tara's remains. One of the most experienced pathologists in the country, known for his work on high-profile cases like JFK and John Bennett Ramsey, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After careful study, he determined that Stephen's account of events did not align with the evidence. Stephen had asserted that Tara died from a head injury, but the forensic analysis revealed that the actual cause of death was strangulation. When Stephen finally regained consciousness, detectives went to see him in the hospital. He told them what really happened that evening. According to him, when Tara came home and said she had to leave a day earlier, they got into an argument and he started yelling at her. When she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her. Tara hit him in the face. Enraged, Stephen struck back, then strangled her. He dragged her body from the second floor to the garage and placed Tara in the trunk of her car. At the same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen told her that his wife had just left him. The next morning, he took the body to his father's workshop, making sure no other workers would be there. Stephen destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, then dismembered her body using a saw. He also mentioned that he vomited twice while doing all this, but he kept telling himself, "If you don't do this, you'll end up in prison for the rest of your days." Several hours later, he packed the remains into plastic bags, placed them in a container, and returned home. Leaving the body in the car for a few days, he'd been thinking how to dispose of the remains while creating an alibi for himself. He repeatedly called Tara and left messages on her voicemail, begging her to come home. One day, he took his children's snow sled to the park where he had hidden the bags containing Tara's remains. There, he placed the container on the sled to move it away from busy areas and started pulling it up a hill. Suddenly, the rope slipped from his hands, causing the sled to roll downhill and overturn the container, spilling the bags. Hurriedly, Stephen collected the bags, put the container back on the sled, and later buried the remains under remote snow-covered areas before heading home. A few days later, as the police launched their search for Tara in the park, Stephen grew anxious. He remembered one of the bags, the largest, was poorly hidden and feared it would be discovered soon. Acting quickly, he walked to the park, slung a few bags over his shoulder, and carried them to his father's workshop, leaving them on the roof. The day prior to his interview, he took the container from his house, transported it to the workshop, retrieved the bags, and returned them to his garage. The following day, police obtained a search warrant for the house and discovered the bags in the container. Stephen then confessed that when his guilt became undeniable, he had initially planned not to surrender alive. However, he failed to carry out his plan and survive, despite nearly freezing to death. During his conversation with the police, Stephen displayed no remorse. On the contrary, he frequently smiled and joked, even when recounting how he disposed of the body. While Stephen awaited trial in prison, his children remained in the care of his sister. However, Tara's family expressed dissatisfaction with this setup. Despite Stephen's sister maintaining communication with him, expressing sympathy, and even making light-hearted remarks about Tara's murder, Tara's relatives persisted in their efforts. Eventually, they succeeded in having the children placed with Tara's sister, though Stephen's family retained visitation rights. The trial commenced in November 2007. While Stephen did not contest his guilt, his new lawyer argued for a reduced sentence, citing the crime occurring after years of marital strife due to his wife's frequent absences. During the trial, it was revealed that Stephen had fabricated Tara's intention to leave a day earlier. According to Tara's boss, she had no additional meetings scheduled and was expected to begin work at her usual time. This was corroborated by Tara's sister, who had spoken with her shortly before the murder. Tara had informed her that she would be home all weekend as usual. There was no evidence to substantiate the allegation that Tara was cheating on her husband. Her boss confirmed their relationship was strictly professional, supported by their email exchanges and texts. Stephen himself admitted he didn't genuinely believe it. The prosecution couldn't establish that Stephen had premeditated the murder. It appeared he acted in a moment of rage, which might have warranted charges of second-degree murder rather than first-degree. On December 21, 2007, Stephen was unanimously found guilty by the jury and sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict without success. Since then, Stephen has been serving his sentence behind bars, but that wasn't the end of his story. Tara's murder captured the nation's attention, drawing millions of eyes. Stephen, while in prison, took to writing a book and sought his sister's help to publish it. They even entertained ideas of a potential film adaptation, with Stephen contemplating which famous actor would portray him. In 2008, another revelation emerged. Stephen's children confided in their aunt, disclosing that they had witnessed their father killing their mother on that tragic evening. They had come out of their room upon hearing screams and observed the entire incident. When this information surfaced in the media, Stephen's relatives dismissed the children's account as lies and staunchly stood by his defense. Also in the same year, it was revealed that Stephen's father, unlike other relatives, could not bear to live with what his son had done. His body was found in his own home. As of now, Stephen remains behind bars, and he will only be eligible for parole in 2058. Every year, Tara's relatives and friends host a marathon along the route in the park where she used to jog frequently. Her children are always among the participants. Despite their father's actions, they have found the strength to move forward and honor their mother's memory. Feel free to share your thoughts on this story in the comments section. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching. Two girls rode their scooters to the store for snacks, but their outing took a dark turn with shocking details. Over the years, the story had many unexpected twists, some almost unbelievable, and the ending was quite surprising. Michaela Garecht was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. She was the long-awaited first child her parents had hoped for after trying for 5 years. Later, Michaela's parents had 2 more children, and they all moved to the quieter town of Haywood, a peaceful place for their growing family. Michaela was a cheerful child who loved playing with her siblings and spending time with her best friend Katrina. Living across from each other, the girls were constant companions, always visiting and playing near their homes. On November 19, 1988, Michaela and Katrina, both 9 years old, were happily running between their houses, trying on outfits for a school show. It was the start of Thanksgiving break, so that the girls were excited. Around 10 a.m., Katrina's dad gave her $1 to buy some candy. The girls quickly went to Michaela's house to ask her mom if they could go to the nearby store, which was less than a mile away. Michaela's mom hesitated because they were only 9 and had never gone to the store alone. They had always gone with family or older friends. After some convincing, Michaela's mom agreed, but only if they bought candy and came straight home. She was especially worried about Michaela's safety, since she was their first child, born after many years of trying. That day, Michaela's mom felt confident that nothing bad would happen. The store was close by, and the girls planned to ride their scooters there. Michaela ran back to Katrina's house. They needed 2 identical scooters, so Katrina took hers and borrowed another one from her brother. They rode to the store, left their scooters outside, and went in to buy candy. When they came out, they got distracted talking and forgot about their scooters. They started walking home, but quickly remembered and went back to where they had left them. That's when they saw that Michaela's scooter was gone. Thinking someone might have moved it, the girls decided to check around the store from different sides to find it. Michaela walked through the parking lot and soon saw her scooter next to a car parked a few yards from the store. She went toward it, but suddenly Katrina heard a terrifying scream. She ran back and saw a man grabbing Michaela and forcing her into the car right next to her scooter. The man quickly got back into the driver's seat and sped away. Shocked, Katrina ran into the store and told the cashier what had happened. The cashier immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. The store employee also called Michaela's father, who he knew, and informed him of the situation. Michaela's father, along with Katrina's father, rushed to the store where investigators were already present. He told his wife to stay home by the phone in case the police called. The detectives immediately faced several challenges. There were no security cameras near the store, and the only person who saw the kidnapping was Katrina, who was so shocked she could barely talk. Her dad took her home. The store cashier gave the first clue. She said a strange man had been hanging around the store just before the kidnapping. He parked his car, got out, but never went into the store. Instead, he walked along the building, looking through the windows, and seemed to be watching the girls. The cashier thought he might be planning to rob the store. She described him as a white man, about 30 years old, with a noticeable mustache. He was driving an old maroon sedan, but she couldn't identify the make or the license plate number. After getting a description of the kidnapper, the police made a sketch and shared it with the media. News of the abduction spread quickly through the city and beyond, shocking people that such a bold crime could happen in a busy area. The police also shared the sketch and description of the suspect's car with hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Officers started stopping any cars that matched the description, hoping to find the girl alive. The detectives then sent Michaela's scooter to forensic experts for examination. They suspected the kidnapper saw the girls arrive at the store and deliberately moved one of the scooters closer to his car to facilitate the abduction. They hoped his fingerprints might be on the scooter. They did find a partial fingerprint that didn't match anyone in Katrina's family or Michaela, but there was a problem. The the partial print made it difficult to search in the database. At the time, technology wasn't advanced enough for such tasks, so the police had to compare it directly with potential suspects' prints. By the evening of the abduction, the FBI had joined the investigation due to a rise in child disappearances, not only in Haywood, but also in nearby cities. They suspected a possible link between Michaela's case and these other disappearances. Despite the FBI's involvement and widespread media attention, there was little progress in finding the missing girl. Michaela's parents were devastated. Her mother blamed herself and remembered a troubling incident just a week before the abduction. One morning, Michaela woke unusually early, sat at the kitchen table, and said she was writing a poem. This was unusual because she wasn't known for waking up so early. She mentioned hearing a noise in the attic and was inspired to write about people being taken there, not harmed. At the time, her mother found it strange for a 9-year-old to have such ideas. But after the abduction, it took on an eerie and almost prophetic meaning. She couldn't help but wonder if Michaela had somehow foreseen her own fate. Over the next 2 days after the abduction, the police worked tirelessly to search for the suspect and the missing girl. Despite their best efforts, they encountered many obstacles and were no closer to finding her. As a result, they decided to talk to Katrina again, hoping she might remember more details now that some time had passed. However, this led to a surprising development. Katrina's description of the kidnapper's appearance differed significantly from the one given by the cashier who witnessed the abduction. After the abduction, Katrina described the man as around 20 years old, with long, messy, light-colored hair down to his shoulders, a face full of pimples, and striking blue eyes that reminded her of a fox. She also remembered his car, a beige sedan that was boxy and had several dents. This information surprised the police because the store cashier had given a different description. The cashier had been suspicious of a man acting strangely near the store, but Katrina, who had seen the abduction happen, described a completely different man and car. This created a big problem for investigators because they had shared an inaccurate sketch of the suspect with the media and patrol officers, leading everyone to look for the wrong person. In the crucial first 48 hours after the abduction, considered the most vital for swift action, the police swiftly created a new composite sketch based on Katrina's description and circulated it widely. They also took the proactive step of interviewing all men in the vicinity with previous convictions for sexual offenses. Volunteers joined in, canvassing door to door to speak with residents in hopes of identifying the abductor or gathering any useful leads. Thousands of flyers featuring the girl's photo and details of the incident were distributed, with an astonishing 42,000 handed out in just the initial days. After a few days, they received their first promising lead. 3 individuals reached out, recounting a hiking trip in a sprawling national park near their city. While exploring, these seasoned hikers discovered footprints on the ground, a set belonging to an adult and another to a child. They chose to follow these tracks, eventually finding a blanket and discarded fast food wrappers deep in the forest. The police began considering the possibility that these traces could be linked to Maya and her abductor. The FBI's psychological profile indicated that the abductor would probably take the victim to a location far from civilization. The national park's vastness and proximity to the city fit this theory perfectly. Detectives mobilized extensive resources to search the park thoroughly. Ground teams combed through the area, and helicopters equipped with thermal imaging surveyed from above. Despite these efforts, they found no sign of the girl or any clues. Subsequently, the police extended their search to other parks, mountains, and remote areas. But each effort ended without success. During the first month of the investigation, the case garnered widespread media attention across the country, resulting in an overwhelming influx of tips, approximately 4,000 in total. Investigators faced significant challenges in thoroughly investigating each lead. The case became a topic of intense discussion among residents of neighboring San Francisco and nearby cities. Prominent individuals also joined efforts, appealing to the public to provide any relevant information to the police. In response to the urgency of the situation, a substantial reward of $70,000 was offered, and Michaela's photograph was featured on millions of milk boxes throughout the state, aiming to reach as many people as possible. Despite extensive community involvement and a flood of leads, detectives struggled to make any headway. By the end of December, a month and a half into the search, police admitted that despite checking thousands of leads, they had made no significant progress. For months afterward, the investigation remained stagnant. Police diligently followed up on numerous tips, and Michaela's mother conducted her own investigation, studying similar cases and attempting to identify her daughter's abductor. Despite the lack of breakthroughs, they held on to hope that Michaela was still alive and that the perpetrator was keeping her somewhere in captivity. In 1991, police started looking into a 43-year-old man named Timothy Binder. The more they investigated his past, the weirder it seemed. Before Michaela's disappearance, Binder had already caught the attention of the police because of his strange actions. He'd been sending presents, letters, and cash to many young girls. Some of these letters had parts of the Bible underlined, like, "I have chosen you and be with me." Worried parents of some of the girls called the police on him, which led to Binder being questioned. He said he was just trying to make friends with the girls because he thought they were alone. But the investigation uncovered a dark past. In 1985, Binder lost his job at Child Protective Services in Colorado because he was caught collecting personal details about young girls. Then, he started sending them presents, money, and letters. When the police searched his van, they found a lot of pictures of kids and Bible verses stuck all over the inside. On top of that, Binder had been arrested before for trying to get 2 girls into his van, but no charges were pressed. Plus, Binder would often visit the graves of young girls in cemeteries and spend an oddly long time there. But things got even creepier. Just 6 months before Michaela vanished, a 7-year-old girl named Amber disappeared from the same area. Soon after that, Binder contacted Amber's mum, offering to help and visiting her house a lot. He even wrote a weird letter to the police, saying the next missing girl would be 9 years old. A few months later, Michaela, who was also 9, was kidnapped. After she disappeared, Binder kept calling Michaela's mum, visiting her house and again offering to help. But this creepy pattern continued. In early December of 1988, Binder sent a Christmas card to an FBI agent who studies criminal minds, someone he had talked to before. The picture on the card showed a girl holding up 4 fingers. Not long after that, a 4-year-old girl vanished from the same town. Even though these details were strange and suspicious, they weren't enough real proof, so the police got a warrant to search Binder's house where he lived with his wife. But unfortunately, they didn't find anything solid that connected him to any of the missing girls. When the news reported on Binder's strange actions, people started to think he might be a murderer who attacks people one after another. This led to people bothering and attacking him and his family. Binder even ended up suing the city because they spread wrong information, and he won the case. The police kept looking into him for months, but in the end, they couldn't find any real proof that connected him to the missing girls. Some detectives even thought he wasn't a danger to kids, and his odd behavior might have nothing to do with these cases. So the police started looking at other possible suspects. For 4 whole years after Michaela vanished, there weren't any new clues. Then, in December 1992, a prisoner in Indiana who was in jail for robbery contacted the police. He said he knew who took Michaela and even claimed to help hide her body in the same park where they found some evidence. At first, the police weren't interested, but then the prisoner wrote a letter to a famous newspaper in San Francisco, and everyone found out. The police got a lot of criticism for not listening, so because of the pressure, they decided to talk to the prisoner. He promised to not only show them where Michaela was buried, but also take them straight to the killer. They brought him to California, and he went searching with the police. The prisoner said the body was buried in a field of flowers called Gladiolus, and the police searched that area all day. After 8 hours, the prisoner finally admitted he lied about the whole thing. He said he just wanted to help Michaela's family feel better and move on. But Michaela's family and the police were very angry about his fake story. The prisoner got an extra 6.5 years in jail, almost twice his original sentence. On top of that, he had to pay Michaela's family $6,000. Then, in August 2000, there was a new lead in the case. Police arrested a man named Curtis Anderson for killing a 7-year-old girl the year before. He admitted to the crime and went to prison, but detectives thought he might be responsible for other similar crimes too. For 7 years, they couldn't find any real proof until Curtis himself contacted the FBI. He was very sick and wanted to confess to other crimes before he died. In his confession, Curtis admitted to killing 13 other girls and women, including the 7-year-old girl Amber, who vanished 6 months before Michaela. He gave details that made the police think he might be responsible, but it was still hard to prove he did it because they couldn't find any bodies or other evidence. When they asked him about Michaela, Curtis said he didn't do it, even though his car looked similar to what Michaela's mum described. The FBI planned to ask him more questions, but Curtis died in 2012. The investigation took another turn when a prisoner contacted the police. He said his cellmate, Lauren Herzog, looked exactly like the drawing of the suspect in Michaela's case. The police were interested because Lauren and his partner had already been caught for killings they did together. They were suspected of killing 19 people, but investigators weren't able to prove all of those crimes. Sadly, just a month before the cellmate spoke up, Lauren had committed suicide in prison. The police still looked into the possibility that Lauren was involved. A picture of Lauren when he was younger did look similar to the suspect drawing, but they needed more proof. So, they decided to dig up a well where Lauren and his partner used to dump the bodies of their victims. They found tons of tiny bone pieces, which doctors then examined closely. After a long investigation, they figured out the bones belonged to 5 different girls, but none of them were Michaela. The police checked several wells, but they couldn't find anything to connect Lauren to Michaela's case. The case took a big turn in 2018. A man named David Mitch was arrested for killing 2 women in 1986 near the town where Michaela disappeared. This was all thanks to modern science. Back then, they couldn't analyze tiny evidence they found under the victim's nails, but with new technology, they were able to link David to the crimes. David was already in jail for killing his girlfriend in 1989. The police suspected he might also be involved in Michaela's case, and they found some interesting clues. David was in the same area when Michaela vanished. He also looked like the description Katrina gave, and his car was similar. Since the police already had David's fingerprints on file, they took another look at the partial fingerprint found on Michaela's scooter. Thanks to modern science, they hit the jackpot. The fingerprint on the scooter matched David's perfectly. In 2020, the police charged David with Michaela's murder. Even though nobody believed Michaela was still alive, David said he wasn't guilty. The trial finally began in early 2023. There were some meetings beforehand to decide if there was enough evidence, and the judge said yes, the trial could go ahead. David's lawyer argued that the fingerprint on the scooter didn't necessarily mean David kidnapped Michaela. It seemed like a weak argument though, since whoever took Michaela clearly left the scooter next to their car on purpose, probably to lure her close. The defense also tried to argue that David shouldn't be charged with murder because Michaela's body wasn't found. But that reason wasn't good enough anymore. In many cases these days, people are found guilty of murder even if the body isn't found, as long as there's a lot of other evidence. On top of that, David had a bad history of violence. When he was 16, he broke into a house and threatened a woman with a knife. He only served a year in prison and got released early. But he didn't learn his lesson and tried to attack another woman soon after. That landed him back in prison for 2 more years. Then, in May 1988, just 7 months before Michaela vanished, David got arrested for robbing a store. Again, he only served part of his sentence and was released a month before Michaela disappeared. Michaela's father came from another state to be at the press conference, where they announced they arrested the person who took his daughter. Sadly, Michaela's mum, who always held on to hope that Michaela was alive, couldn't be there. She was fighting cancer, and shortly after the news of the arrest, she passed away. But before she died, she thanked the investigators for finding the truth. The police are still searching for Michaela's body and are offering $10,000 to anyone with helpful information. David Mitch's trial is coming up soon. They will be looking at 3 cases, Michaela's and the 2 murders where his DNA was found under the victim's fingernails. At first, the prosecutors wanted to seek the death penalty, but the person in charge changed and the new one decided against it. Even if David is found guilty of killing all 3 women, he won't be sentenced to life in prison, just many years behind bars. This decision made the victims' families very angry, and it was all over the news. The only person who agreed with this change was David's lawyer, but David is already 62 years old, so it's unlikely he'll even live long enough to serve the whole sentence, even if it's shorter. It's important to remember that the prison system let him out of jail early multiple times, even though he kept committing crimes. If they hadn't released him just a month before Michaela disappeared, she might still be alive. All right, everyone, that's all for today. If this case piqued your interest, leave a comment below and let's discuss it. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime content. Your support keeps the channel going, so thanks a bunch.
A mom put her girls to bed. The next morning, one girl was missing. The mom was scared. She knew her daughter didn't leave the house by herself. The police came to help. They looked everywhere but couldn't find the girl. They found some strange things, but they couldn't figure out what happened. It took a long time, but the police finally learned the truth, and it was truly shocking. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Her dad left when she was a baby, so her mom moved in with her grandparents. They helped raise Kirsten. When Kirsten was 2, they moved to their own house. Her mom got married again and had another baby named Faith. That marriage didn't work out either, so her mom raised the girls alone. Kirsten helped take care of Faith. They were close and shared a room. Their mom slept next door. One night, when Kirsten was 8 and Faith was 3, their mom put them to bed. Usually, she read them a story, but Faith was already asleep. She kissed Kirsten goodnight and went to her room. She left the girls' door open a little, like she always did. Around 3 a.m., she heard a noise. She thought the girls woke up, so she went to their room. The noise stopped when she got close to the door. She thought they fell back asleep, so she was going to leave. But then she noticed something strange. The door was closed, but she always left it open. She opened it a little, but didn't go in. Then she went back to bed. The next morning, around 6:30 a.m., Shannon went to wake the girls. She entered their bedroom and saw that only her younger daughter, Faith, was in bed. She woke Faith and asked where Kirsten was, but Faith didn't know. Shannon immediately began searching the entire house, but Kirsten was nowhere to be found. She looked outside and called all her friends whose children Kirsten knew, hoping she had gone to one of them. None of them had seen her. Desperate, Shannon called her father, who lived nearby, hoping Kirsten had gone to him, but he hadn't seen her either. Realizing Kirsten had disappeared, he told Shannon to call the police and went to their house. Shannon called 911, and officers arrived within minutes. At first, they thought Kirsten might be hiding somewhere in the house or had gone for a walk. Their town had never experienced a child being abducted from their own bedroom, so the local police had never dealt with anything like this before. However, the officers soon realized the situation was more serious. In Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. Outside, they discovered a piece of children's underwear stained with blood a few yards away. Shannon confirmed it belonged to Kirsten. The police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping and immediately called for more officers to assist. When they searched the area around the house, police questioned Kirsten's mother. She recounted waking up at 3 a.m. after hearing a noise, realizing that an unknown criminal was likely abducting Kirsten at that moment. The search around the house yielded no results, so the police started interviewing all the residents in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, none of them saw or heard anything suspicious that night. The only lead was from a neighbor who was awakened by a dog barking around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. Failing to find any solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to speak with Faith. Despite being only 3 years old, she shared that she had witnessed the abduction, but kept repeating only one phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten did not leave the house willingly, but provided no further clues to identify the perpetrator or locate Kirsten. Detectives had to restart the investigation from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her room without making a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother had a history of drug-related problems. They considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this, perhaps as a form of payment for a debt. The alternative was even more chilling. The police did not rule out the possibility that the mother willingly handed over her daughter, which would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. They spoke with Shannon, but she denied any involvement. She claimed she had been clean from illegal substances for a long time and insisted she would never give away her daughter. The detectives didn't rush to clear her of suspicion, but they couldn't find any evidence against her. So, they reached out to the public for help through the media, asking anyone with information to come forward. Over the next few days, the police received hundreds of calls. Detectives followed up on each lead, though most were superficial and lacked valuable information. Then, they received a disturbing tip. A woman suspected her boyfriend might be involved in the kidnapping. He had been acting aggressively and even told her during an argument that if she didn't obey him, he would do to her what he did to Kirsten Hatfield. Investigating this man, the police discovered he knew Shannon's brother, meaning Kirsten might have known him too. The girls and their mother lived in a house that had previously belonged to Shannon's brother, so the suspect might have been familiar with the layout. The man also had a history of drug involvement and assault. Everything pointed to him as a potential suspect. However, the man claimed he was at a bar that night, and police confirmed his alibi through witnesses, placing him at the bar until around 4 a.m. This eliminated him as a suspect. The investigators pursued hundreds of other leads, but they all led to dead ends. As months passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive dwindled. Shannon couldn't just wait and do nothing while the police struggled. From the beginning, she did everything she could to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media, distributed flyers, and even investigated various suspects herself. She faced many challenges, like when she asked local businesses to display flyers about Kirsten. Many refused, citing company policies. She also tried to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon set up a small center to attract volunteers for Kirsten's case. They focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon faced new problems. Some volunteers stole money, others lied about their work, and some used the media attention for personal gain. Despite all this, Shannon never gave up on finding the truth. After years of fruitless efforts, she decided to take a new approach. She went back to college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon chose this path not just to find her daughter's kidnapper, but also to protect others from dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. She believed the person who took Kirsten had a criminal past and studied individuals with violent histories in her town and nearby areas, hoping to find a connection to her daughter's abduction. Unfortunately, all her efforts led to dead ends. Shannon eventually accepted that Kirsten was likely no longer alive, but she never completely gave up her quest for answers. The police occasionally reopened the case, following new leads, but with no results. They even worked with the FBI to create an age-progressed sketch of Kirsten. Though no one believed she was still alive without her remains, they couldn't say for sure. The case remained stagnant for many years until an unexpected turn in 2014. A woman contacted the police with a strange story. While sorting through her recently deceased grandmother's belongings, she found a diary. In it, the grandmother wrote that her own son had confessed to killing Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was full of detailed descriptions, leaving detectives with no doubt about its authenticity. According to the diary, the man abducted Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a nearby town where he owned a house, subjected her to heinous acts, and then brutally murdered her. The gruesome details spanned several pages and horrified even seasoned investigators. The diary also mentioned that the entire ordeal was recorded on video cassette. Detectives immediately brought the woman's son in for questioning. While they expected him to deny everything, his response was surprising. He claimed he wasn't involved, but knew who did it because the girl was killed in his ex-girlfriend's house. This baffled the police, so they asked for the address. Detectives quickly obtained a warrant and sent a team to investigate the property. They sprayed luminol, a substance that glows upon contact with blood, even if it's been cleaned. The results were shocking. One forensic expert said the entire house lit up like a Christmas tree. The bloodstains matched the gruesome details in the diary. Experts removed floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent everything to the lab. They also began excavations on the property, hoping to find Kirsten's body. Additionally, they found a box containing hundreds of video cassettes. Remembering the diary, they knew one of these tapes should contain footage of the crime. Detectives painstakingly reviewed each tape, a process that took countless hours but found nothing related to the murder. The excavations also yielded no results. There were no remains or evidence in the soil on the property. But then, the police got a big surprise. The blood they found wasn't human, it was from an animal. They were really upset because they thought they were close to solving the case. They didn't know why someone would do this. Maybe someone was playing a mean joke on them, or maybe someone who was sick in the head saw the news and made up a story. The detectives still hoped to find the truth, but nothing new happened. The case got stuck again. In the summer of 2015, Kirsten's case was assigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller, who decided to start a fresh investigation. As he reviewed all the existing documents and records, Miller noticed something odd. To his surprise, he realized that over the years, his predecessors had not examined two crucial pieces of evidence: the blood on the windowsill in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Although these pieces of evidence were stored in the warehouse, they hadn't been sent to the lab for analysis. Perhaps the police back then thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, and that analyzing it wouldn't yield any new information. Miller decided to change that and sent the evidence to the lab. Soon, the lab called him back, stating that both blood samples belonged not to Kirsten, but to an unknown male. This was a long-awaited break, but Miller faced a new challenge. The abductor's DNA sample was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, but there was no match. This could mean that he hadn't committed serious crimes, or that it happened before the database's creation. Nevertheless, Miller was undeterred. He decided to collect DNA samples from all the men involved in the case since the abduction. The police compiled a list, located each person, and sent their DNA to the lab. Surprisingly, every individual willingly provided their samples right away. This led investigators to consider that the murderer might not have been part of the case files. Despite this, Miller patiently awaited the results until he finally got a call from the lab. The experts had completed the analysis of one of the samples and found that it perfectly matched the blood found on the victim's windowsill and underwear. The individual was 56-year-old Anthony Palma, a neighbor of the Hatfield family who lived just across the street from them. Palma was one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. Back then, he told them he woke up around 3 a.m. because his dog was barking. Now, with confirmation of his involvement, detectives decided to speak with him again. While DNA evidence was more than sufficient for a conviction in court, investigators hoped to extract a confession. Firstly, it would significantly expedite the trial, and secondly, only he knew where Kirsten's body was, making it nearly impossible to locate her remains without his cooperation. Detectives chose to proceed cautiously. They invited Anthony for questioning, stating it was a routine process. Supposedly, they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, hoping to gather some new information. In reality, they had a specific task: to get him to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Initially, detectives asked if he remembered anything else from that night. Anthony recounted the same story as 18 years ago. This time, however, Anthony added a new detail. He claimed he saw a white car parked in front of Kirsten's house, but didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked him about his familiarity with the girl and her family. Anthony said he knew them as neighbors, but had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He mentioned that he got along well with other neighborhood kids, who sometimes asked him to fix their bikes or stop by for candy. When the police asked if he had ever been inside Kirsten's house, perhaps because the girl's mother had asked for his help or he had visited just to chat, Anthony said he had never been inside while the family lived there. For the detectives, this was a critical moment in the interrogation. Given that Anthony's blood was found on the windowsill of the victim's room, they had caught him in a lie. This meant that in court, he wouldn't be able to claim that the blood came from a different visit, like one on another day. There was, however, an issue. The house where Kirsten lived had previously belonged to Anthony's friend, and he admitted to visiting it during those years. but the blood on the windowsill was clearly fresh and couldn't have been left there many years ago. Despite this, detectives decided to proceed with the main part of their interrogation. They informed Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony continued to deny any involvement, insisting he had never been inside Kirsten's home. Despite the investigators' attempts to extract a confession, he remained firm in his denial. They decided to change tactics and left the room. Detective Miller then entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it on the table in front of Anthony. Anthony immediately pushed the photo away and refused to look at it for the rest of the conversation. Miller asked him various questions, hoping Anthony would slip up, but he stuck to his story. Realizing they couldn't get a confession, the police ended the interrogation and arrested Anthony. They obtained a search warrant for his house and thoroughly searched the area, but found no trace of Kirsten's remains or other evidence. During the trial, Anthony continued to deny his guilt, but the DNA evidence was clear. The court also uncovered overlooked details from Anthony's past. Years before Kirsten's abduction, he had broken into another girl's bedroom and assaulted her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a weapons-related attack. These prior offenses highlighted his dangerous nature, but his past was missed in the initial investigation. In late 2017, the jury found Anthony guilty of Kirsten's abduction and murder, sentencing him to life in prison. Despite his conviction, Anthony never revealed where he had hidden her body. The police feared they might never find it, given Anthony's familiarity with remote areas from his job with park services. Kirsten's mother continued to visit him in prison, hoping for answers. Each visit left her feeling closer to discovering the truth, but it never came. In early 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who harbored personal hatred toward him for his crime. With Anthony's death, the family's hope of finding Kirsten's remains now rests on the chance that hunters or travelers might come across them in remote national parks. All right, guys, please share your thoughts on this story in the comments section. And don't forget to hit the like button. If you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching.